Quick bit of exam technique, 3-mark questions in philosophy exams. Spend maximum 3 minutes on them. You don't want to spend too long. They're simple, straightforward, often definitions, as I've said elsewhere. They're designed to start you off, make you feel confident, get the ball rolling. Just make sure you say enough to get 3 marks. Extend it so that the examiners will be happy to give you 3 points for what's in front of them. Very roughly say 3 things, but that's an extremely rough guide. If you think you've run out of things to say, but it still looks like there's loads of space, try giving an example of what you've just defined. That's the mark scheme for 3 markers. Here are AQA's favourite words. Well, favourite word in particular. It must be precise. Give your answer precisely. Say exactly what you mean. Don't waffle. Don't say roughly the right thing. Don't say vaguely the right thing. Use precise, accurate philosophical terminology that is completely on the money. 5-mark questions. Spend about 10 minutes on them. Look at what the command word or verb is in the question. It's almost always explain and or outline. Don't evaluate, don't analyze anything. Obviously they might ask you for a criticism that's on the specification, but don't bring in your own evaluation and analysis. Yeah, make sure you've got 5 marks worth of material and that you're precise in detail. There's the 5-marker mark scheme. Now 12-mark questions. This is where things change a bit. 12-mark questions after the 2 5-markers, you want to spend about 20 minutes on, just under perhaps, but no more than 20 minutes I would advise. Again, look at what the command word or verb in the question is. Explain, outline. It might be compare and contrast. The one specimen we've got for Metaphysics of God is a compare and contrast one. It's still just AO1. Don't evaluate anything yet. Still, don't give your own analysis, that is to say, your own philosophical analysis of the issue at hand yet. Say that for the 25-marker. Be precise, full and detailed as usual. Run out of explanation and exemplify, and obviously you need more detail and content than 5 markers. That's the mark scheme or the top of the mark scheme that the examiner will have in front of them when they're marking. There are the favourite words again: full and precise answer. Look, precise appears again. Use that technical philosophical language accurately. If you think carefully and check it over and don't just splurge things onto the page, but draw on the vocabulary that your teacher has taught you, you will be able to do this. You'll be fine. Think things through logically. And then finally the 25-mark questions. All the remaining time I would spend in that section on this. So for an individual section of the exam, 50 minutes. I'd spend about 50 minutes on a 25-marker question. More if you can, because this is where you can really come into your own, and you're going to be spending the most time on these, aren't you, giving your own analysis. There's no set way to do them, is there? It's hard to just give you a template, but I'm going to try and give you one anyway in case you want it, in case it's helpful. You only get 5 marks in 25-mark questions for knowing things. They will even give you can even get top band if you misattribute arguments. It's not about the knowledge and showing, look, here's all the things I've memorized. It's, can you analyze, can you evaluate, can you make a philosophical argument about the arguments that you've studied. So they wanted the answer to the exact question. I can't stress that enough. That should be underlined and in italics and with flashing lights and people dancing around it as well. You must answer the exact question. They want a philosophical argument answering the exact question in front of you. I would suggest doing a quick plan for that. That's going to help organize your thoughts. Just a quick little plan and obviously proofreading at the end. Alright, here's my suggested way of doing them. You don't have to use it. This is patented. Dr. Tarasinko, I haven't stolen this from everyone else. I like Segal, okay? Segal. State what you think at the start. Just say right at the start, no, I don't think the cosmological arguments show that God exists, or whatever it is. And that means you know exactly what you're arguing, the examiner does as well. You don't have to beat about the bush, and they don't have to hunt for it. Then, still in the first paragraph, explain. Explain the arguments or issues under examination briefly. So you might want to say it's on cosmological arguments. Just give a brief outline of what the cosmological arguments are. You could decide to focus on 1 or 2 in particular if you think those are the strongest cosmological arguments, but this is where your own analysis always should be guiding what you're doing. Alright? But a brief explanation of the claim or the argument under discussion. Then G is a bit weird, but just to make it a vaguely memorable word, G is for give a criticism of the argument. So say you briefly explain what cosmological arguments are, then you could say, one criticism of cosmological arguments that is common is this, and then mention Hume's problems with causality or whatever it is. I would suggest the criticism you think is most important because you're going to have the most interesting things to say about that one. So you want to front load that with your essay. Other ways to do it, that's just my suggestion. And then most importantly, here we go, it's the most important bit, analyze that criticism. Don't just say what it is, say either why you agree with it, or even better, how someone could argue back with it, and then how you'd argue back with them. This is what you need in your paragraphs to be the biggest part, where you're in detail analysing the criticisms which you studied and learned, giving your own opinion and argumentation about them, just as you might do in a class discussion. Draw on your thoughts from your class discussions for these, please, in order to be making your overall argument. Because then, effectively, you're just repeating G and A. Now I've analysed this first criticism in detail and given my own opinion to make my own argument about it relating to my initial claim. Now I'm going to repeat that for another criticism. I would say for A2 essay, the sweet spot is probably about 3 criticisms in massive depth. AQA say they will take many criticisms done in less depth, very broadly, but it actually seems to me that from what they've said, they prefer less criticisms handled better, with more philosophical analysis and depth. So really doing deep dives on the different ways people might think about the claims under discussion and going back and forth dialogically. Philosophy emerges from dialogue, doesn't it? So if you can be writing dialogical essays that consider multiple sides and then land on one side with you arguing the case for that position, that's the way to write a good essay. Make sure your argument weaves all the way through though consistently. So it's integrated, the argument. You're making the same case all the way through, even if you think some criticisms are weightier than others, or even if you think some aren't actually significant, the fact that you've shown others are will contribute to your final conclusion. Because you need to land clearly on your own conclusion again, so you can say, clearly I've now demonstrated what I said I was going to argue at the start, and the examiner agrees to maybe briefly sum it up, but it doesn't have to be very long at all. For this, and that reason, boom, done, Bob's your uncle, go home, thank you for my grade in philosophy, I've now got into university, and I'm going to go on to live a happy and fulfilling life. Here's the 25 marker mark scheme, just the top band, because the lower bands are less done well versions of this. Clear intent throughout the question, the answer, sustaining that too, so you're arguing your case all the way through, complete and comprehensive response. Yeah, make sure you're dealing with the question in its fullness. Doesn't mean you have to mention every criticism, but you haven't left out any terms that are in the question. Clear conclusion with arguments supporting it. Precisely, there's that word again, be precise all the way through. Sustain your argument all the way through in new technical philosophical language. Oh yeah, and here's another really key phrase. Judgments about the weight to be given to each argument. So crucial arguments are identified against less crucial ones. That just means that you can say, alright, this criticism is really strong for these reasons, even though you could argue back against it. This is really strong for these reasons. However, this one is less strong. So a cunning tactic might be to have 1 or 2 strong criticisms, or criticisms you judge to be strong, and then one which you don't think is so significant, and therefore you can show weighting. Again, that's just a suggestion, that's one way to do it. Here's just a little bit plugged into my 25 marker structure. Say you got analysis of the concept of God revealed in this, evaluate this claim, although you probably won't get that because they tend to give question mark questions these days, AQA. You could say, straight out of the gate, I do not think analysis of the concept of God reveals exists. So you're answering the question in one sentence, or responding to the claim in one sentence straight away. Or obviously it could be, I do think, depending on what you actually think. Then briefly explain the ontological arguments. Don't go into massive detail trotting them all out. No point in that. Just saying you know what they are. They're deductive and they're a priori, and they aim to claim. They aim to prove God's existence from the mere definition of God. This has been criticized by, for example, Kant, saying existence is not a predicate. I say, and then say what you think about that criticism. Analyze and evaluate it to make your own argument. So you might want to try and argue that existence not being a predicate is irrelevant to ontological arguments. That would be quite controversial, but you can try, go for it, why not? As long as you make your case well. It's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. That's very Kierkegaardian, that. Then repeat that for, say, a couple more criticisms, maybe more, maybe less, depending on how much depth you're going into, but depth is best. Weaving your argument all the way through, not suddenly changing and think, oh, actually, no, I do think this ontological argument works. Stick to your initial claim all the way through, so at the end you can conclude, wrap up, land on your conclusion.